Welcome. We're glad you found this recorded presentation by the Knox County Master Gardeners. We are a volunteer community service group affiliated with the University of Tennessee, as well as Tennessee State University and their cooperative extension programs. The mission of the Knox County Master Gardener program is to educate and serve the community using research-based information on best practices in horticulture, environmental stewardship, and integrated pest management. One of the ways we educate is through our Speakers Bureau.
Hello everyone, I'm glad you could join me. My name is Amy Haun, and I'm here to talk about some of my favorite vegetables to grow: the garlic, the onions, and the leeks. I started growing garlic in 2006 and soon fell in love with this easy to care for plant. Now, if you look at my planting chart from then, it's way too crowded. Don't plant yours like this. As I continued to grow garlic, I learned more about the family it belonged to, the Allium family, and found that there were other plants that would be welcome additions to my garden and my kitchen. The perennial onions, Egyptian walking and bunching, and the perennial leeks. Many of the plants in the Allium family form bulbs in one part of their life cycle. These bulbs are easy to save, to replant, and to share. The ones that I grow that do this are the Egyptian walking onions, the garlic, and the leeks. I also grow bunching onions, but they don't make bulbs. Bunching onions and allium bulbs all have a growing part called the basal plate. From this basal plate, the roots grow down and the leaves grow up. Without an attacked basal plate, an allium will not grow. When you plant an allium, you need to plant the basal plate down. The roots will quickly start growing, then the leaves will start shooting up. On a bulbing onion, the leaves will become fleshy, but this doesn't happen with these perennial onions I'm talking about today, but they're all quite tasty. Another common thing about alliums is that sometime during their life cycle, they all put up a reproductive stalk. For some of these, the leeks and the bunching onions, it's actually a flower that produces seed. For others, the Egyptian walking onions and the garlic, they produce a stalk that has miniature bulbules on them. You may have noticed that I've been calling these perennial alliums, and so I want to make sure you know what perennial means. A perennial plant lives for years, and with an allium, it is that basal plate that lives and grows, either in a bulb or in a division off an existing plant. An annual plant is planted from seed and in the same year will produce new seed and then die. Now that we've gone over the basics of the perennial alliums, I'd like to talk to you about why I grow them, what makes them outstanding, and why you should consider growing them. We'll start with the first one I started with, garlic. Some of the things that attracted me to it were it is easy to grow, and you can plant quite a lot in a small space. I soon realized if we used even as much as a head a week, I could grow all the garlic we needed and enough to replant in 2 3.5 by 3.5 foot beds. The other bonus was you plant it in November and harvest it in late May or June, so you have most of the summer to use for other plantings. Another attractive feature is all the variety, the hard neck and the soft neck, but those are broken down into 10 different types. and hundreds of different varieties. So far in my garlic growing, I've only grown 8 of the varieties in 5 of the types. There's a lot more different flavors and colors and clove shapes to explore. And I haven't even mentioned the joy of using fresh garlic and garlic scapes in the kitchen. Garlic scape pesto and garlic scape butter, juicy, flavorful garlic cloves to put in cooked dishes from every culture, and garlic to dry to make the most outstanding garlic powder I had ever experienced. And now for the 2 different kinds of bunching onions I grow, the Egyptian walking onions and the regular bunching onions, which also are called Japanese bunching onions, Welsh onions, or spring onions. I grow the Egyptian walking onions as part of my effort to grow all of our onions for the kitchen. These are strong flavored onions and do well when cooked. The bunching onions are a little bit milder, and having a pot right outside the kitchen is wonderful when we need a little bit of scallion to add to an omelet or a soup. And if you need more, I just cut them off at the base and leave the root in the ground as they regrow quickly. This is just 5 days later, so as you can see, in a week or 2, they would be regrown to usable size. The Perpetual Leeks are the latest addition to the Alliums in my garden. I started growing them as an experiment and have continued to grow them because I really like them in potato leek frittatas, in soups, and in a really nice vegetable broth concentrate that I found out about through the Splendid Table podcast and always keep in my freezer. If you harvest them at the right time, all the green parts are also usable, so you get quite a bit of harvest. And if you neglect them, you get some beautiful flowers that actually dry well. Now it's time for part 3 about growing these alliums. Garlic needs a well-drained sunny location with moderate fertility and good drainage, so raised beds work really well. Once you have your heads of seed garlic, the first thing you do is break them apart. You divide the large cloves from the small ones. The small ones and any that appear soft or damaged go into the kitchen. The large ones can be set aside for planting. Garlic is best planted with a spacing of 4 to 6 inches apart and about 2 inches deep. To make this easier, I use 2 different tools that you can see on the right. The longer one is called a planting board and has notches every 3 inches. I saw this idea on Growing a Greener World, the program that Joe Lampel does. And the dibbler, which is marked at 2 inches, helps make the holes. When planted in late October or early November, garlic will grow several inches before we get really cold weather in late December or early January. At this time, it also usually stops growing from the short days and the cold temperatures. As we go further into the new year, you'll notice the garlic starting to grow. When you notice that, it's time to give it some fertilizer. You do need to check the bag of the fertilizer that you have. I usually give mine an all-purpose organic fertilizer and follow the directions on the bag, as the exact ingredients do vary. Come the middle of April, I start looking for garlic scapes that will be coming out of the center of the hard-knit garlics. When the scapes start to curl around and generally before they've made a full circle, I try to harvest them by just bending them and snapping them off near where they come out of the plant. The next step is the harvest. You have to watch the garlic. The bottom leaves will start dying, and when there are between 4 and 6 leaves remaining, it's time to harvest. You do want to dig instead of pull, as the tops can snap off. Be careful as you dig so you do not damage the heads, as damaged heads do not store well. Brush off as much dirt as you can and lay them out in a single layer in a well-ventilated outdoor space so that they can cure. You want to leave them about 3 weeks until they are dry on the outside. When I do this, after the first day or so, I will peel the outer layer off, the one that has the most dirt on it, so that I am drying nice clean garlic ready to go inside. I grow the Egyptian walking onions in a very different way. Once I have some good-sized plants, I establish a mother patch. This is a semi-permanent spot in the ground where I space the plants about 10 inches apart and let them grow for several years. The goal of this patch is to produce top sets. I take those top sets, and especially if they are small ones, I put them in a pot of seed starting mix to let them grow a little bit before I try to separate them, as you can often break the basal plate off of them when they're in the clump, and that would actually kill the bulb, as we've talked about before. After I have good-sized plants, I'll often put them in a pot to use for green onions, or between my different garlic varieties as a fairly main crop by the time the garlic is done. The bunching onions are easily started from seed. To do this, you sprinkle the seed on top of seed starting mix in a pot. You can keep it on a bright windowsill or under lights inside for the rest of the winter. They'll quickly grow from the size of a pencil lead to the size of a pencil, though if your seed starting mix does not have any fertility, you will need to add that in the form of a liquid feed. Once they're to the size of the pencil, you can plant them outside in an empty spot or into a container. For larger starts of the Egyptian walking onions and the bunching onions, I find it easier to trim the roots to 2 inches or less. Then I can plant them with the basal plate down in the soil, give them some water to settle them in. These can be planted either in an empty spot in the vegetable garden or in a container. With the Perpetual Leeks, you have to look at the size of the bulb to know how deep to plant them. Larger bulbs need to be planted deeper, with smaller bulbs being planted closer to the surface. You want to aim for being about 3 times the height of the bulb down, and that'll give it a good start. Another thing to know about these is they do go completely dormant in the summer, so don't be surprised if you think you've lost them. But in the spring, they'll come back again with more shoots than you started with. Those shoots can be divided and replanted into beds in your vegetable garden or pots. I like to put them along the edge of a place where I have herbs planted. To harvest these, you cut the tender leaves like we did with the bunching onions, or you can dig the whole plant and reserve the offshoots, either to replant or for the kitchen. As I said before, they do go totally dormant in the summer. Another word of caution in growing these alliums. When they put up their protective stalks, those stalks are generally tough and really don't do well in the kitchen, though they could be part of a soup stock. At that same time, particularly with the leeks, some of the older growth gets tough. So make sure and check them carefully before you throw them in a skillet. And now, where do you find starts? Garlic is readily available in the farmers markets in the summer, or garlic farms online right now. And you can even find some good looking garlic heads at your grocery store. These will grow garlic, though it's not often well adapted for our climate. It might be a good place to start. Egyptian walking onions are in most vegetable gardening catalogs anymore. It used to be a hard one to find, but now it has gotten quite easy. The seed for bunching onions is available in many of the gardening catalogs, and I've even found it at Walmart. The perpetual leeks are actually quite hard to find. And so I'll tell you one source where you can get them, and I will have some references where you might be able to find some hints. But these are actually not very available currently. I had initially planned to do this talk in person, but that's not possible right now. I have reserved a fair quantity of starts for Egyptian walking onions, perpetual leeks, and seed for bunching onions. If you are interested in getting any of these, I've set up a Google form where you can make the request, and I will contact you to figure out how to get these to you safely. You need to go to the listing for this talk on October 19th, 2020 at the Knox County Master Gardener.org website. It will be listed as one of the links for this talk. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and I hope it's encouraged you to try some of these wonderful vegetables.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation and that you learned something that will help you in your gardening endeavors, whether that means more blooms on your flowers and ornamental shrubs, attracting more pollinators to your garden, or improving your vegetable production. As we were not able to field your questions today, we want to close by offering you some ways to reach us. As you can see on this slide, we have a presence on Facebook. You may post questions to either of these Facebook pages. Feel free to upload a photo, especially if it helps to describe the problem you have. If you are not a Facebook user, you may call the Extension office at 865-215-2340 and leave a detailed message with your question. Your question will be forwarded to a Master Gardener to research and respond to you. You may also send an email to Ryland Thompson, the Knox County Extension agent who advises the local Master Gardener program. If a photo would help to describe the problem, feel free to attach one or two. Try to keep the total attachments to less than 5 megabytes. You may get a response directly from Ryland, or he may route your question to a Master Gardener to research and respond to you. We are eager to return to public presentations. In the meantime, you can watch any of our recorded presentations by going to our website, finding a Speakers Bureau event on the calendar, and clicking on the link that is included within the event details. Now, let's go get some dirt under our fingernails.